This national consultation is an acknowledgement that democracies, even very good ones like ours, need to be nurtured and monitored and reviewed. And I think it's a sign of a civilised society when the government of this country is inviting us, the citizens of the country, to participate in that review. Now, the committee is charged with the task of consulting the Australian people and reporting your views back to the government. And the three questions we need to answer on your behalf are, as I said, which human rights and responsibilities ought to be protected and promoted? Are they sufficiently protected and promoted? That, in other words, are there problems, and where are those problems? And thirdly, how could Australia better protect and promote human rights? The government has also, if you look closely at our terms of reference and look on our website and read the background material, the government has also ruled out constitutional change, so that is outside our terms of reference. It doesn't mean that we won't listen to what people have to say about entrenched rights entrenched in the Constitution, but that is not something that's within our terms of reference. So a Bill of Rights in the American model, where rights are constitutionally entrenched, won't be considered. So the only charter that will be considered is a statute. That is a piece of legislation passed through Parliament, made by Parliament, which can be changed by Parliament. It can be scrapped by Parliament if that's what Parliament decided to do. And such a charter would also preserve the sovereignty of Parliament, because Parliament could still pass laws that are inconsistent with this charter.
And you heard Mary talk earlier about parliamentary sovereignty. Well, I'm going to just debunk that little myth. Australia doesn't have a system in which Parliament is sovereign, despite what just about every media article I've seen about the human rights process has indicated. In Australia, it is our constitution that's sovereign. Our federal parliament gives way to our federal constitution, as do our state parliaments. And it's important to remember that we do have a law in Australia that sits behind everything, that is a fundamental law that can't be tampered with by government. And so it's not impossible to say in this country, well, some things are bigger than Parliament. And so the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948 was a recognition that there is a limit, that we have to say no to the power of governments, and particularly around things like equality, the equal treatment of people based on a whole range of characteristics. So 1948, the 10th of December 1948, an Australian was in the chair at the United Nations, Doc Evatt, and he was handed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by Eleanor Roosevelt. It was an incredibly significant moment, and Australia was an incredibly significant player in establishing that declaration and of including in the declaration economic, social and cultural rights. It was really Australia that advocated for that over a lot of criticism from others, and certainly there was resistance from Eleanor Roosevelt and from the US government delegation, but it was the Australian view that prevailed. Even the right to vote, which Mary referred to, is a very circumscribed right in Australia. Many prisoners don't have a right to vote. And if anybody read the Sun Herald on Sunday, you would have noticed that blind people don't have a right to a secret ballot, and there's certainly a debate going on in the federal parliament at the moment about whether or not the pilot that was created for the last federal election that allowed blind people for the first time ever in this country to cast a secret ballot, whether or not we could afford to keep that going. The fact that something like money could get in the way of one of those most fundamental of democratic rights astounds me, but there are certainly people who think it really doesn't matter enough.
If we're going to be talking about human rights in our region, human rights in neighbouring countries, then we've got to show some leadership as well. And we had great leaders. Robin spoke about Doc Evatt accepting the Universal Declaration. Jessie Street, another wonderful Australian, worked first of all in the League of Nations and then fought and won to have women included in the considerations of the League of Nations, and then had to fight all over again to make sure that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights also included the right that, or the statement that men and women are equal. So not just for our own citizens, particularly for our most vulnerable citizens, but also so that we can hold our heads high on the international stage and say we have something, we've got a lot to be proud of here, that we can take the next step and have even more